Welcome to the last parak of Mesechet Rosh Hashanah. As mentioned in the third parak, most of the rest of the Masechta deals specifically with the topic of Rosh Hashanah itself, the Yontiv of Rosh Hashanah, the mitzvah of Shofar, the mitzvah of how we daven on Rosh Hashanah, and we're going to see a couple other things in this parak, the Takanot of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and things that are related to that. Let's begin with Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Aleph discusses the following situation. Yontov shel Rosh Hashanah shechal liyot b'Shabbat. That if Yontiv falls out on Shabbos. So what happens if the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos, as it can fall out in our calendar? What's the status when it comes to blowing shofar? Now one should be aware that shofar blowing is not a malacha. It's not one of the 39 types of labor that one is not allowed to do on Shabbos. In fact, it's considered a chachma, a skill, and therefore technically it should be permitted on Shabbos. However, there was a man named Rabbah, and Rabbah was afraid that since people are not so skilled, they would carry in a place where there's no eruv, they would bring their shofar to a person who would blow shofar for them. So out of fear of that, Rabbah said that we cannot blow shofar on Shabbat, nor can we read Megillah or take a lulav for all the same reason, out of fear that Shabbos will be violated in the zeal to fulfill these mitzvot. The question the Mishnah deals with, and there's a general rule that when the rabbis make a decree, when Chazal decree that you're not allowed to do something, it does not apply in the Beit HaMikdash. So the Mishnah tells us, B'Mikdash hayu tokim aval lo b'Medina. The Mishnah tells us that they used to blow shofar in the Beit HaMikdash, even on Shabbat, but not outside the Beit HaMikdash. That's how Rashi understood this Mishnah. The Rambam understood this Mishnah to mean that Mikdash meant the entire city of Yerushalayim, that when Rosh Hashanah fell out on Shabbos, they blew shofar throughout the entire city of Yerushalayim, and Medina means anywhere outside of Yerushalayim. That was a discussion between Rashi and the Rambam and their understanding of the mitzvah of blowing shofar on Shabbat. The Mishnah then tells us, Mishacharav Beit HaMikdash, when the Beit HaMikdash on Tisha B'Av was destroyed, so now there were new realities that had to be dealt with. Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana, made a halacha, sheyu tokim b'chol makom sheyesh bo beitin. The truth is that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that any place that has a beit din, that has a court, that has a Sanhedrin, they are allowed to blow on Shabbat. Now, the reason for this is the following. So the reason why it was permitted in the Beit HaMikdash is because the Gemara has an expression, Kohanim zurizim him. The Kohanim are very careful not to violate any of Averot and keep the mitzvah very carefully. So for that reason, they would make sure that nobody would carry a shofar on Shabbos. The same thing is where any place where there was a Beit Din, where there was a Sanhedrin, they were very careful to make sure people did not violate the Shabbos. So therefore, you were allowed to blow any place where there was a Beit Din. After the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, the Beit Din moved to Yavna. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, said Rabbi Elazar, Lo hitkin Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai el bi Yavna bilvad. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, according to Rabbi Elazar, that you can only blow shofar where there was a Beit Din, he only meant Yavna. Amrulo, the rabbi said to him, Echad Yavna, ve'echad kol makom sheyesh bo Beit Din. Not only in Yavna, but in any place where there is a Beit Din. That was the first Mishnah. We turn now to Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Bet tells us, Ve'odzot haita Yerushalayim yitera al Yavna. There were 4 fundamental differences between when they used to blow shofar on Shabbos in Yerushalayim as opposed to Yavna, says the Mishnah. Shekol ir shehi ro'ah. Any city that would see, meaning any city that is close enough to see Yerushalayim, Vishamat, you also have to be close enough to hear the shofar from the city. Ukirova, or the place must be within the Tchum Shabbos. V'yachol lavo, and it's possible to walk to the city without any problem, no roadblocks like a river. Token. So if you're any one of these four situations around Yerushalayim, you were allowed to blow shofar on Shabbos. V'yavne, however, the rule was in Yavne, lo ayu tokim ella beveit din bilvad. You're only allowed to blow shofar in the Beit Din itself, meaning not the rest of the city, not even if you could see, if you could hear, if you could walk there, it made no difference, only in the Beit Din. But in Yerushalayim, any one of these four realities allows you to blow shofar on Shabbos. Mr. Gimel tells us some of the takanot, some of the halachot that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made in order that people should remember the Beit HaMikdash after it's destroyed, and not only remember the Beit HaMikdash, but our actions of remembering the Beit HaMikdash is really a tefillah that we ask Hashem to bring back the Beit HaMikdash. One of his takanot had to do with the Yontif of Sukkot. Barishona, originally, Haya lulav nital b'mikdash shiva. The Mishnah tells us that originally the mitzvah of lulav, as the Torah lays out for us, is 1 day for everybody else, uva medina yom echad, which is what means 1 day for everybody else. But in the Beit HaMikdash, it was 7 days. The mitzvah of lulav in the time of the Beit was 1 day outside the Beit HaMikdash and 7 days in the Beit HaMikdash. Hikin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a rule: Sheyehei lulav nital b'medina shiva zecher lemikdash. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai wanted us to remember on Sukkot what used to take place in the Beit HaMikdash. So he made a rule that today, where we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, nonetheless, we should take lulav for all 7 days of Sukkot except for Shabbat. Now, what does that mean practically? That means the first day we are fulfilling a mitzvah min HaTorah, and the rest of Sukkot, it's the Rabbanan. Second takana he made, V'sheyehei yom hanev kulo asr. And the second takana mentioned in this Mishnah is that the halacha is the one was not permitted to eat the new grain, known as Chadash, until the second day of Pesach, Tet Zayin Nisan, which was the day they brought the Korban HaOmer. Now, without the Korban HaOmer, as soon as the sun rises on that day, one is permitted to eat from the new grain. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was afraid that the Beit HaMikdash should be built right away, and people will forget that you're supposed to wait for the Korban. So what did he say? Shehei yom hanev kulo asar. He delayed eating from the new grain 1 day. He said, wait till tomorrow on the 17th. Do not eat from the new grain until the 17th. So people will remember the Beit HaMikdash and will remember that there should be a Korban HaOmer. That was another one of the two of the takanot of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Mishnah Dalet returns briefly to a discussion of the halachot of Kiddush HaChodesh. Mishnah tells us the following situation. Although the Mishnah is specifically talking about Rosh Hashanah, it's talking about what happens on the 30th day of Elul. They are anticipating Rosh Hashanah, but they don't know if it's going to be day 30 of Elul or day 31. Barishona, says the Mishnah, Hayu mikablim edut hachodesh kol hayom. Originally, they would wait on the 30th of Elul the entire day to see if witnesses would come. Pamachat nishtahu ha'edim lavo. One time it happened, and the edim came very late. And by coming very late, that means in the Beit HaMikdash, they already brought the Korban HaOmer. Then nitkalkalu al-Leviyim b'shir. And there are two explanations what this means. Either the Leviyim sang no shir shel yom, or they sang the weekday one, not the Rosh Hashanah one. But now witnesses came, and that day became Rosh Hashanah. Hitkinu shelo yehu mekablim ela ad hamincha. So they made a rule that once the Korban Tamid was brought in the afternoon, they no longer accepted witnesses, and they kept that and they did not declare Rosh Hashanah for that day. However, if witnesses would come after the Korban come in, they used to keep both days, the 30th day and one Tishrei as Rosh Hashanah. That's where the custom came that in Eretz Yisrael, the minhag is that Rosh Hashanah is celebrated as 2 days as well, because it was a common practice even in Eretz Yisrael in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Then the Mishnah continues with a couple of more things related to this. Mishachara Beit HaMikdash, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sheyu mekablim edud hachodesh kol yom. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a rule that we can go back. Why not revert it back to the original? Let's accept the witnesses all day. It didn't matter because they were not concerned that the Levium would be messed up. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, said Rabbi Shua ben Ozel Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, a further takana, Sha'afilu rosh beit din b'chol makom, shelo yehu ha'edim holchem el makom avan. The rule was that the head of the Beis Din was the one that declared Rosh Chodesh. However, let's say he was away from the Beis Din. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a rule, you always go to the place of the Beis Din, even if the Beis Din was not there. Shelo yehu ha'edim holchem el makom avan. You went to the place where the Beit Din was located. This concludes our discussion of the fourth parak of Rosh Hashanah, Mishnayot Aleph through Dalet.